In less than an hour, we start the 10th of Ramadan on our Hijri calendar. The date has special importance and significance for us in this country because it marks a victory aimed at liberating and recuperating part of our territory. It marks the return of our pride and our dignity. It was not to occupy or to steal someone else's country. It was not to steal someone else's rightful resources. It was to regain the honor of a people, regain what is rightfully ours. That was 48 years ago. God-given resources are the right that was given by the Almighty, not by His subjects, and no one can be granted the unilateral right to decide what goes to whom. This is why protecting the lifeline, safeguarding the continuation of a civilization is a matter of life and death. It's a matter of honor and pride. It is a matter of survival. Good evening. You're watching the Business Insider on Nile TV International, and I'm Ayman Salah. Our weekly program tackles events affecting economies and business, and we aim to bring you the inside story. Welcome back. Let's start with some news. The first news item: Egypt is one of three MENA economies that will see GDP growth return to pre-COVID levels in 2021. Fitch analysts said at a webinar on Monday that this conclusion is based on expectations of a strong rebound in the oil and gas and tourism industries this year. MENA country risk analyst Salim Al-Badri said that Egypt's GDP is expected to grow at a 2.9% in fiscal year 2020-2021, marking a slight downwards revision of the 3% Fitch predicted in January due to a bumpy vaccine rollout. Increased natural gas production will be a key driver of economic growth, as well as a tourism sector recovery expected to drive medium-term growth. And the World Bank estimates that air pollution costs Egypt at least 47 billion Egyptian pounds a year. 2 weeks ago, a $200 million International Bank for Reconstruction and Development loan was approved by the House Energy and Environment Committee to tackle Cairo's air pollution. Poor quality air causes long-term health issues and strain on the healthcare system, as well as reduces productivity from chronic illnesses and missed work days. The cost of air pollution is equivalent to 1.35% of our GDP. The sizable economic hit from air pollution is a global problem. The total global cost of premature deaths, disabilities, chronic disease, and sick leave from fossil fuel air pollution alone was estimated at $2.9 trillion, or 3.3% of global GDP in 2018, according to a report by the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. Cutting pollution is the ultimate solution, while the challenge is how to do it without impeding development. Reducing pollution without curbing economic growth relies on government and private sector initiatives, as well as lessons learned from other economies. We'll be back. Welcome back. Climate change and climate action is our topic tonight, as well as the Leaders Summit taking place in Washington, D.C. to discuss these issues. With us tonight is Dr. Moataz Zeid. He's a professor of business law, and he's going to give us his insights into what is happening there and what is happening on a global scale. A pleasure to have you with us on the show. Let's watch this report and get back to you.
The global climate exercise happening this week attempts to ensure close coordination with key players in the international community to set the world to address the climate crisis, including emissions reduction, finance, innovation and job creation, as well as resilience and adaptation. The Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. paves the way for the U.S. to return to the world fight and demonstrate strong climate leadership and chart innovative paths to a net zero economy. The key themes of the summit include encouraging major economies to reduce emissions this decade and to achieve the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. It also seeks to mobilize public and private sector finances to drive the net zero transition and to help vulnerable countries cope with climate impact. The economic benefits of climate action will also be covered, with strong emphasis on job creation and the transition to a new clean energy economy, as well as encouraging transformational technologies to help reduce emissions and adapt to climate change, while creating enormous new economic opportunities and building the industries of the future. Entities that are committed to green recovery and equitable vision of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as well as those working closely with national governments to advance ambition and resilience, will have the opportunity to be showcased while discussing opportunities to strengthen capacity to protect lives and livelihoods from the impacts of climate change and addressing the global security challenges posed by climate change and the impact on readiness, and addressing the role of nature-based solutions in achieving net zero by 2050 goals. The primary objective of the summit is to encourage the world's major economies, and especially the original members of the Major Economies Forum on Climate and Energy, which together represent 80% of the global emissions and 80% of the global GDP, to enhance ambition to keep the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach.
Welcome back. So climate change and climate action are our topics tonight. With me is Dr. Moataz Zeid, Professor of Business Law. Pleasure to have you with us on the show. Good evening, sir. All right, let's start with the Leaders Summit that is starting Thursday in Washington, D.C. There are around 40 leaders that are joining in this conference, and it marks the U.S. return to the global scene when it comes to climate change and climate action.
Yes,
how do you interpret this?
Firstly, no doubt that this summit will take place with a very welcoming atmosphere all over the world. And as you said, of course, the returning back of the U.S. role to manage or to encourage this summit will be very effective and very noticed by all the countries. But let us look at from another vision or another direction. Like it's one of the steps taken by many countries since it was declared in Paris Agreement in 2015, when they are putting the first rules or the first principles to manage or to organize this international cooperation in the field of climate and saving the environment all over the world. And of course it was reassured another time in the declared goals of the United Nations for the sustainable development, and of course saving the environment and having a clear and clean climate was a very clear goal of these goals or these declared goals. And of course the summit of climate actions was or took place in 2019, which witnessed a participation from the Egyptian representatives, and of course the presence of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in this summit in 2019 was a very effective and a very lightning point to begin these steps or this summit. And of course the summit will be held tomorrow, will be one of the great steps on this road.
All right. When we look at topics included in this summit, one would think that active and tangible steps will be taken. However, when one looks at the practices on the ground, one still has doubts, and this can be affirmed by NGOs like Greenpeace, yes, and so on and so forth. They are very keen on highlighting the deficiencies that are taking place in the world when it comes to this. We're talking about emissions reductions, yes, and when you talk about emissions reductions, you took industrialized nations, and industrialized nations, they have exceeded their carbon emissions limits, if you will, and they try to buy the carbon limits from other countries, and so on and so forth. Where are we in terms of reducing emissions? You heard, I mentioned a piece of news in the beginning from the World Bank report, which talks about air pollution, whether here in Egypt or whether around the world. And if we talk about Egypt, it costs us at least 47 billion Egyptian pounds a year. But if you talk around the world, you're talking about 2.9 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars, or 3.3% of world GDP. Are we anywhere near achieving emissions reduction, and to what level?
Of course, to estimate this according to the next event or summit will be held, it will not be clear or very clear now, but according to the huge number you are talking about, it must be a priority in the movement all over the world for the next maybe years or decades. Firstly, according to the economic element or economic standard, of course, participating of great powers and great economics like US, like many countries from Europe or something like this. This indicates that there is a great intention or a great welcoming for, yes, of course, to take some steps in this field, even beginning by summits or by meetings or something like this. And as you said, this summit will make a place for participating of individuals, maybe NGOs, some governments or formal institutes, to give some experiments or to give some project or to encourage some initiatives can be done in some countries or to be effective or can be imitated or repeated in other countries. And of course, according to the widespread of the industrial economic, as you said, of course, it must be considered to look about the climate change affected, of course, by this special branch of economic and returning back or trying to return back or taking some places beside industrial economic like agriculture, like saving economic means or economic resources, depending upon renewable energy, maybe decreasing the warming standard all over the world, and
decreasing the warming standard. You're talking about the 1.5 degrees Celsius,
yes, of course,
target.
This is one of the main information in this summit and one of the main targets of this summit, of course. And of course, this standard of global warming affects, of course, no doubt, affects the economic maybe growth or economic practice even for great economics or even for developing countries.
Is keeping a limit to global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach?
I think maybe. But we cannot be sure of this because it's a try.
Right. Let me take this question to Dr. Wafi Nusir, member of the Environment World Congress. Dr. Nusir, a pleasure to have you with us on the show. I don't know if you've been following, but one of the topics that are being discussed in the Leaders Summit starting Thursday or tomorrow is to coordinate efforts by world major economies to reduce emissions, to keep a limit to warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Is it within reach?
Yes, pleased to be with you, and best of always my wishes in Ramadan for all of you. Of course, let me just correct the 1.5 degrees Celsius, because we already have exceeded this degree. So the limit which was stated on the Paris Agreement in 2015 was 2 degrees Celsius. So now this is the target. But let me first go over the summit that will be held tomorrow. By the way, let me say that tomorrow is the Earth Day. So the U.S. administration has chosen this date particularly to give a message to the world that we all together. After rejoining the Paris Agreement in January 2021, the new U.S. administration invites 40 world leaders to the Global Climate Summit, underscoring the urgency and the economic benefits, which I hope that Dr. Abu Zeid will explain more for the economic. And this is, let me stress on this item in particular, because this is the smart move of the new U.S. administration. In the contrary of the previous administration, the new U.S. administration is attracting the world leaders, but by saying a better environment is cheaper for us, not the pollution. The pollution is expensive, and this is the smart move.
Pollution is costing 2.9 trillion US dollars annually?
Yes, of course. The numbers is not in my mind now, but he will state all the benefits, the economic benefits that the world leaders could gain from adopting or contributing to the new agreement. The new agreement tomorrow is just a preparation for the major conference or summit that will be held in Glasgow in November of this year, which is called COP26. COP means cooperation of partners. So this summit is very important. So there are many questions for tomorrow. If you want to
yes, I'm interested to know what would you see are the major challenges facing tomorrow's summit?
Yeah, this is a very, very important question. Are the United States, together with Europe, ready to take on the much-needed global climate leadership? Because nowadays we are in a critical situation. Actually, let's just mention the virus and what happened with the economic in the world, and what happened of the deaths happened all over the world. So this is a sequence of the pollution that we are facing. So this was the first question. The second question, what can we expect to happen in the run-up to the COP26? Because tomorrow will be, let me say, we will experience the reactions of all the world leaders, of all the countries, especially Asia, China.
But Dr. Wafi, it's not about the 40 leaders that are there. It's about the major industrialized nations that are taking part. And here you're talking, as you mentioned rightly, China, Europe. Europe here, you're talking about certain countries in Europe, namely Germany, France, Italy, and so on. So one would say that there are major countries that one would focus on. Now, for the purpose of development of these countries, would they have the willingness to reduce emissions, to reduce their carbon footprints in order to achieve the goal, the 2 degrees Celsius goal, and other SDG goals as well?
Yeah, that's what we will see tomorrow. Because, as I told you before, it will be a preparation for the COP26. So all of the countries will say its agenda for reducing its emissions of the greenhouse gases and turning on to the renewable energy. It will discuss the economic benefits of making this. And of course, tomorrow is a good day. Is a good day for the world to agree.
I will ask you, Dr. Nosser, to stay with us on the line, and let's answer your question. If Dr. Moataz would tackle the economic effects and benefits of combating climate change and combating pollution.
Of course, if we are talking about economic development or economic growth, and of course they are different from each other, any development steps or actions for economic must be related, no doubt, to climate or to the environment as well. If you are talking about economy, so we are talking about manpower, we are talking about resources, we are talking about markets, we are talking about international cooperation, maybe, and of course all these 4 elements or standards can be affected, no doubt, by climate change, by environmental change, even by the biological equilibrium between the world or all over the world. So no doubt there is a direct effect for any economic steps or economic development related to the environmental or climate change. This is the first point. The second point, I think concerning countries
let me put it in another way. You're talking about a cost that countries around the world are suffering from. They are burdened with $2.9 trillion annually, or 3.3% of GDP. So this is due to air pollution.
Air only.
Only air pollution, not climate change. Only air pollution. So that's why I'm asking you, if we're talking about economic effects, what do we need to take into regard?
If you are talking about air pollution only, air pollution will affect all the economic standards that we are talking about. This is the first point. The second point, as you said, it will be a very load upon the countries to combat this percentage of air pollution and to have these costs to combat this kind of pollution. And of course, if even we can solve all the other problems that meet us in climate change or environmental change, having this cost upon our economic standards, it will be, of course, a very great effect, even outside from the climate or environmental standards. So we must put in regard, as you said, that we have some goals to be achieved, a sustainable plan that must be managed or to be performed, and of course this cannot be away from the environmental or climate standards or climate regards and environmental, of course. So according to the economic view, or according to the economic goals that regarding after this summit of tomorrow, no doubt working upon development of economy or economic growth cannot be away from regarding this climate or environmental pollution.
All right. Dr. Wafi, let me put it in another way. if we're talking, is Dr. Wafi still with us?
Yes, I am.
All right. If we're talking about air pollution costing us $2.9 trillion annually, that's when we tackle pollution. When we tackle global warming, you are talking about effects on the environment, the global climate. You're talking about effects on agricultural production. You're talking about effects on fisheries. You're talking about effects on an array of items. So the effects and benefits of tackling climate change and global warming, if you are to put it in points, what would they be?
Well, let me just phrase it first in one sentence. It's a matter of to be or not to be. That's it. We have reached to the limit. If we are not wake up now, then it's too late to wake up again. Okay? And let me put it in points so that we can understand what is happening. First of all, we have a population increased incredibly. In 200 years, we have increased from 1 billion population to 8 billion. So it's a huge increase in a short time.
So 8 billion, you're talking about the need to provide them with resources.
Of course, we are damaging the natural resources of the planet. We are destroying its water. The global warming is just one effect, but the carbon emissions are absorbed in the oceans and the sea, and the water have acidity that kills the fishes and destroys the marine life.
So you're talking about the balance of nature changing.
Yes, of course. The ecosystem are imbalanced. The biodiversity is increasing. The species are dying of animals and planets. The forests are on fire, and so far we have no international protection for the Amazon forest, for example, and Siberia, and Australia, and Africa.
Yeah.
We are living in a separate island.
All
Each country is thinking in itself.
And we have, Dr. Nusser, we have a balancing game that needs to be maintained. And here I would ask Dr. Moataz to solve this puzzle, if you will. Yes. You have, as Dr. Wafi said, we increased from 1 billion in population 200 years ago to 8 billion now. Yeah. So basically, you need resources, you need job opportunities, you need development.
Yes.
And you have many underdeveloped or developing nations that need to grasp the opportunity, increase their production, therefore increasing their pollution. And you have industrialized nations that are already contributing greatly to climate change and to pollution and to carbon emission, the increase in carbon emissions. How do you solve this? How do you balance this formula to develop and maintain the climate, maintain the environment, or to develop and to repair the climate?
As you said, it's really a puzzle, but I think after 2 years, I think in facing the pandemic of COVID-19 and after the second or the third waves of this pandemic now, which all the globe suffer from, of course, we can now have a second thinking about the relation between the economic growth and consuming the natural resource. Of course, as you said, the old equation that you must affect the international pollution, or you must increase the international pollution to achieve any economic growth or economic development, using maybe some harmful sources of energy, maybe having a lot of wastes or something like this in seas, and of course for the air pollution. But nowadays I think that turning in the thinking of new ideas serving this economic development, like maybe smart industries, maybe having a great or a larger part for participation of technology in economic development, and of course creating new job opportunities away or far from environmental pollution or affecting these natural resources. And of course the new trend for the economic growth, depending upon the renewable energy resources like water, like solar energy, like wind, may take place, I think, in many fields of economic development, even for the developing countries that will have a very long time, or maybe not long time, for reaching its development for economic sector.
Dr. Abu Zeid, how is Egypt tackling global climate change, not global, climate change, and decreasing the pollution? What is Egypt doing in this regard?
Of course, Egypt made...
Let's take Dr.
Yes.
Nusir.
Okay, okay.
I said Abu Zeid?
No problem, yes.
And Dr. Nusir.
No
and then I'll let you come.
Okay.
Yes. Well, actually, let me say that Egypt is not affecting the global warming of the planet, but it is affected by the global warming. Now, with the also, don't forget the Ethiopia dam, and that would decrease our water, apart of the decrease that we can face from the global warming as well. So Egypt needs a lot to be done, apart of what already have been done. I appreciate the solar energy planet that was done in Aswan, which is the biggest solar planet in the world.
Bimban, you're talking about Bimban?
Yeah. And of course, all the development of that's happening all over Egypt, including the roads, and this will reduce the pollution in the country as well. And of course, the development of the villages, and all of this happening are good things.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Wafi Nusir, member of the Environment World Congress. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your contribution. It was certainly a pleasure having you with us on the show here tonight. On that note, when we're talking about Egypt and the efforts that are being exerted in this regard, one hears a lot about green projects, green financing, renewable energy, and so on and so forth. Is this part of our commitment, or commitment globally, yes, and part of our SDG commitments, the Sustainable Development Goals commitment, or is this our new way of life?
No doubt Egypt had taken great steps, especially in the last maybe 10 years, towards the developing or concerning the saving of environment, or combating climate change. Firstly, it was a movement according to articles or texts, starting from the new constitution in 2014. Many articles of this constitution were talking about saving the environment, saving the right of the coming generations for a new and clean and saved environment. Of course, the Egyptian economy depends a lot upon agricultural land and green areas, saving the natural resources here in Egypt. trying to enter new technologies and new resources of clean and
renewable.
Yes, of course, renewable sources of energy for the economic or investment growth, and of course saving our wealth or treasures from fishery, from or some other sources or means of
saving and developing.
Yes, of course. This is the first step, or we can say the legal frame that we can move from. The second part, or the second step, was declared according to the strategies and policies by the government, having some initiatives like the initiative was
and Egypt's Vision 2030.
Yes, of course, included in the vision of 2030, which is a real translation for the goals of the United Nations for SDGs, and here for our regional development we declared this policy for 2030, and one of these steps was declaring about the initiative of the Ministry of Environment, Prepare for the Green, which make a great awareness for, especially for new projects or new investments here in Egypt.
Has COVID contributed positively or negatively to the environment?
Of course. It may be negative for the persons, but I think it was very positive for the environment.
All right, so it was an alarm bell, if you will.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so
yes.
Staying at home might pay off.
And this make some space for looking for our environment, of course.
Right.
Yes.
Dr. Moataz Abu Zeid, Professor of Business Law, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll follow and see what takes place in the Leaders Summit as a prelude to the Glasgow Environment Summit. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ayman Salah. Good night.